Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm Laura Green with Kinetic Lighting, joined here by Jennifer Skinner from Kinetic Lighting and Brad from Act Lighting. We are talking today about new UVC products that we are offering to let you guys know about what's going on with those. And just a little blurb about Kinetic Lighting. We're based here in Glendale, California. We do rentals, sales, and show services. So you can head on over to our website to check out more information. But here is a list of all the companies that we are dealers for sales and rentals. And if you have any other questions, feel free to post in the comments and we can help you out with anything. During the live stream today, feel free to ask questions as we go through this webinar, and we will hit all the questions up at the end. So feel free to post as we go, and then we'll take care of it at the end. And now over to Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Skinner. I'm a sales and rental rep for Kinetic Lighting. I wanted to introduce you to Brad. He is with Act Lighting. Act Lighting is a distributor of many products. Today, we'll be just going through two different lines. But Brad is our rep, and we work with him regularly. So, Brad, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I wanted to just jump in here and talk a little bit first about ACT, for those of you that aren't familiar with us, and then we'll get into the real reason why we're here. So ACT Lighting, we are a distribution and manufacturing company in the entertainment lighting space. So we distribute several different brands through the US and Canada, including MA, Ayrton, Robert Juliet, Zactrac, Chainmaster, MDG, and Lexabel. And then we're the manufacturer for AC power distribution, as well as Rapco Horizon cables. So we cover all different kinds of needs in all different kinds of spaces, and we work through our wonderful dealer network like those at Kinetic. So anything that you need, please reach out to us, reach out to them, let us know how we can help. Would love an opportunity to make your project or event everything that you want. So let us know. Let's jump into what we're going to talk about today. So we're here to talk about UVC technology. First thing that we're going to do is an overview of what the technology is and why it's applicable in today's world. Then we're going to talk about safety and how to implement it. Then we're going to talk about the brands that we have offering UVC products and what makes them different between each other. And we'll look at a detailed dive into each of the products that we have. Then we'll go through some real world applications and talk about how to actually implement the technology in your space. And then lastly, we'll do a Q&A. So please, glad for you to join us today. Please ask any questions that you want as we go. We're going to roll through the webinar just to make sure that we get through all of the content. But if you think of a question, type it into the comment box or the chat box on Facebook, and we will come back to it at the end. So really appreciate everybody joining us. And with that, we will dive right in. So let's talk about what UVC is. UVC is a specific spectrum within the ultraviolet band of light. So ultraviolet, of course, being below the visible spectrum in entertainment. We all know ultraviolet as being black lights, but UVC is a particular section of ultraviolet that happens to be on the lower end of that spectrum and is known for germicidal applications. The purpose in UVC and what we're talking about today, it kills or deactivates pathogens and germs. It's been doing that, or we've been using the technology to make that happen for over 100 years. In fact, one of the first implemented uses for UVC was in Europe for water purification in 1903. So it's tried and true technology that has been around for a long time. It's primarily used in medical and sanitation spaces all over the world. And there's a ton of research about it. What's different about it now is that it's becoming more public facing with COVID-19 and everything going on with those conversations. So we're obviously talking about using it in more public spaces and in places where it otherwise wouldn't have been a consideration. So that's why we're learning about it today, to see if it's the right fit for whatever your challenges are. So like I said, it's very proven technology. It's extensively researched. The one thing that is a caveat about UVC, and part of the reason why it hasn't had mass adoption in the past, is because there are some inherent dangers in using it. UVC is not able to be used in direct contact with humans or animals. We'll talk about the exact risks and what they are, but the short version is it's essentially like really powerful sunlight. So, you can get sunburns, you can get cataracts, long-term skin cancer, those kinds of risks. So for those reasons, we want to make sure that we're using the equipment in a way that is safe and we're not exposing people to any of the radiation. So we're going to cover all of that today. If you are interested and you want to learn more about the science part of things, we did do a previous webinar about Luxabel products specifically that went really into the detail of the UVC science stuff. We will post that link in the comment box. So if you want to watch that one as well and get more of the technical ins and outs, we can do that. Today, we're going to focus more on the products. But that's the broad overview of UVC. Let's talk about safety. So as I mentioned, it is harmful to humans and animals. The short-term risks of exposure are equivalent to like a bad sunburn, or if you're familiar with welding arc flash, if you look at a welding arc and it gives you temporary blindness. Long-term risks can be skin cancer or cataracts. So, if you get irradiated unintentionally, it's not going to kill you by any means, but it's certainly not something that you want to do intentionally or regularly. Luckily, PPE for UVC technology is relatively easy. It's just a matter of making sure that you have thick clothing or some other covering for any of your skin. And then they do make UV glasses as well. So you can protect yourself, but regardless of what PPE you're using, we still want to make sure that these products are not being used in occupied spaces. We'll talk about that more as we go on. The products that we're discussing today do have a lot of engineering controls built into them for these safety reasons. So they all have motion sensors, they have visual and audible alarms, they have proper control systems, and we want to make sure that we're using proper signage. But putting all of those efforts together allow us to do this in a safe and manageable way that make the technology functional for today's challenges. One of the most important things when we're doing this from a safety perspective is making sure that you do have designated and trained operators. So if you're going to put UVC technology in your venue or whatever your application is, you want to make sure that the people that are using it, they are trained in how to use it, and that everyone knows that it is their responsibility. So they should have the information and the authority to be able to do so effectively. Another consideration from a safety perspective about UVC technology is material degradation. We get a lot of questions about this. This is, like I said, equivalent to very powerful sunlight. So a general rule of thumb that we use for people is if there's something that you have that you would be uncomfortable with leaving it out in the sun for a couple of days with what it might do to that material, then it's probably going to be affected by UVC. There's a fair amount of research about specific plastics and various materials and how it reacts. There are definitely materials that are inherently UV resistant. So it really is a matter of looking at your specific application, much like if you use a cleaner on carpet or something, they recommend testing it in a small corner so that you can see if there's going to be any discoloration or anything like that. Same kind of idea. So just keep that in mind as well. So today specifically, we're talking about two brands of UVC products that we have in our portfolio. Luxabel is a Belgian-based company that's here on the left. They make products that, while they can be portable or installation, they really lend themselves more towards permanent install. So there are two light fixtures, there's an air purifier, and then there's a hybrid unit, which is basically an air purifier with a light on the bottom. We're going to talk about them in more detail. And then Golden Sea UV. Golden Sea is a factory that is we have a relationship with because of our distribution for Ayrton moving lights. They are the factory that makes Ayrton as well as several other entertainment lighting products. And they have come out with their own line. So because of our distribution of Ayrton, we have the ability to distribute Golden Sea in the US and Canada as well. So they have two different lines of products. One is more geared towards the consumer world, to be used either in small areas or even at home. And then we have industrial products that are geared for much larger spaces. The biggest difference between the Golden Sea stuff and the Luxabel stuff has to do with portability. So as you can see, the Golden Sea stuff, they've got wheels and they're very, very portable in nature by their design. The Luxabel stuff has a lot of features that make them a little bit more robust for installation. So we're going to talk about those differences here. Getting into those details a little bit, things that are shared between them. So all of the fixtures, regardless of which one they are and which brand, they use Philips light sources. This is a really important point. There is a ton of hype about UVC and other sterilizing technology right now. Anybody can come out and say that they have UVC, but whether or not they've done it in a controlled way that is safe and that actually meets the standards that they're saying is a totally different question. So the fixtures that we're discussing today are a pretty package with the right safety features, but the science part of this is done by Philips. They're obviously a commercial giant in the medical and sanitation spaces, and they have all of the research and backing, and they've done all of the work that they need to and been around a long time in this space. So we're using Philips light sources for this so we can trust that the numbers are what they say they are, and it's going to do it in a safe way. One of the biggest things, which we'll talk about, has to do with ozone, which is an emission of gas that can happen at a particular bandwidth within UVC and is often seen in less expensive light sources. So Philips uses a specific type of glass that allows us to make sure that we're filtering out any ozone, which can be super harmful because it's heavier than oxygen, so it can cause you to suffocate. So important things there. We're using Philips light sources. All of those Philips light sources run at 254 nanometers. And that number is 85% of the maximum efficacy possible for the use of UVC in germicidal applications. So it's really, really potent, and it does the job very well. As I mentioned, there are no ozone emissions from any of these lamps because of the type of glass that is used. All of the products are fully UL listed. They are all 120 to 240 volts and auto sensing, so we can plug it into nearly any circuit in the US. They all have built-in motion sensors. They all have wireless remotes with a delayed start. They all have a visual and audible alarm system while in use so that you know what's happening, because again, this isn't visible light, so you can't see that they're on. And they all require competent persons to use them. Now, when I say competent, I'm referring to the OSHA definition of competent person. Again, somebody who's a dedicated and trained operator in order to use them. Talking about the differences, Luxabel is ideal for permanent installation. They have both surface and air purification products. They have the ability to add outboard motion sensors to any of the lighting products. So not only do they have the motion sensor on board, but you could add additional ones that control multiple units or further away or whatever. So that is part of what lends it more to the permanent installation. They have mounting accessories available in drop-down arms and a couple of different things. And we recommend that you use them in a hardwired control system. One of the primary reasons for that is while they do come with a remote, the remote is a one-to-one relationship. So if you had 20 lights, you'd have to have 20 remotes. Hardwired control system is going to allow you to have better controls against who has access to the system by way of lockouts and things that we'll talk about. And it's also going to minimize that control point so that you're making sure that you're doing things effectively, efficiently, and not missing anything. Jumping over here to Golden Sea. Golden Sea UV stuff is ideal for portable applications. They have a wide range of coverage options. There are 8 products in total. The remote works with multiple units, unlike the Luxabel stuff. They also have an additional tip-over sensor, since a lot of these products, as again being portable in nature, they might just be set on a table or rolled out into the middle of the room or something. If something were to happen and those were to get knocked over, they will automatically shut themselves off so that there's no damage to things or fires or any of that kind of stuff. These not only have the visual and audible alarms while in use, but they also have red and green LED status lights that provide info about what's happening and audible indicators. So there's some beep codes, and depending on what the LEDs are doing, you can determine whether or not you're in a delayed start, or if it's done, or if it's running, or what the status is. So there's some great info there. And then the consumer lines do have a child lock function as well, since those are potentially going to be used in homes or around children. So talking about Luxabel products specifically, as I mentioned, there are 4 offerings from Luxabel. So we have the B Direct and the B Direct 2, which are both lighting fixtures designed for surface purification of either furniture, floors, walls, equipment, what have you. These are essentially the same, but the B Direct is a single lamp. You can see here there's just one lamp in here, and the B Direct 2 is a 2 lamp. In form factor, they resemble a fluorescent shop light. They're way more than that, but that's kind of what they look like to give you an idea. And notice on the top here, they do have a yoke if you wanted to mount that You can either screw that into the wall or attach it permanently to something, or you could, if you wanted to, put that on a C-stand or a tripod or something to be able to use it in a more portable fashion. Then we have the B-Air, which is an air purifier. So the B-Air is designed to run in an occupied space and can run 24/7. The reason why that is, we are using UVC technology, but it's contained inside the unit. We'll look at that in more detail in a minute, but this is something that's going to run all the time, and you don't have to worry about the room being empty. And then lastly, we have the B-Hybrid, which is, like I said, essentially a B-Air and a B-Direct on the bottom of it. So those are the four products. Talking about the uses for them and kind of the specs of each one of them. So when you're looking at UVC technology in general, your disinfection time or your dosage time is going to be, we want it to be as short as it can be in order to accomplish the goal. So we'll talk about how we do a system layout to determine exactly what those numbers are, but all of the products are designed for a disinfection time of roughly 15 to 30 minutes. If you wanted it to be shorter, we can make that happen. And if you're okay with it being longer, then we can adjust accordingly with that as well. But we have some short target times. So we're not talking like these have to be on for 8 hours is my point there. So both of these use the same lamp. It's either 1 or 2 tube lamp. Like I said, they have different mounting options. The coverage here is the important part that I wanted to mention. So the B-Direct will cover up to 236 square feet with one unit. Now that's assuming that you're hanging these at about 9 to 12 feet off the floor or from whatever surface you're trying to disinfect. So it's 236 square feet that we can cover, or if you jump up to the B-Direct 2, we can get up to 409 square feet at that same 9 to 12 hang height. So those are kind of the differences in the two units in terms of functional application. If you wanted higher power or shorter dosage time, we can go with the Direct 2s, or if we have a bigger area, we can go with the Direct 2s, although that's not always the case. We'll talk about this in implementation, but UVC is light, even though you can't see it. So light and shadow affect things, which means that you may have times where you want to have a higher quantity of lower power fixtures in order to accomplish the same goal, so that you're making sure that you get super even coverage across everything. So that's the B-Direct and the B-Direct 2. Next is the B-Air. So as I mentioned, it uses UVC tubes inside of it, and it circulates the air through. This guy moves 4,130 cubic feet per hour. So figuring out how many of these you needed in a room is very simple. All we do is we take the volume of the room and we divide it by 4,130. Now this front part here saying 2 times, that comes from the recommendation of Luxabel that we would want to completely circulate the air twice per hour. So notice that here. That's assuming a kind of standard installation where you've got a room with people going in and out, what have you. If this were something where maybe it were in a medical office where you know that you're going to have people that are infected, or it's a super crowded space where you get a lot of foot traffic, you may want to increase that number of the 2 times per hour. Or if it's something where it's not a lot of traffic, maybe it's a closet or an equipment room where only a couple of people have access and they might go, a couple times a day, then you could decrease that number. So you can adjust that multiplier to change how often you want to be able to completely replace the air in the room. But nonetheless, the formula is the same on how you get there, and that tells you how many units there are. So to put that into an area for you, 1 unit can cover up to about a 269 square foot space with the 2 time per hour air replacement recommendation. There is a carbon filter option. We have HEPA filters that run at each end of these air purifiers automatically, but there's a carbon filter option accessory that you can add to this if you wanted to step up your filtration an additional level. It's not included because for a lot of applications it's overkill, and it does add a little bit of cost. So HEPA filter and UVC is standard. If you wanted to add the carbon filter, we can do that as well. Lastly, we have the B-Hybrid. So the specs on the air purifier for the B-Hybrid are exactly the same, and the formula works exactly the same way. And then the B-Direct on the bottom is exactly the same as the fixture. The one caveat here is that the unit requires 2 separate power circuits. So we need 1 circuit to control the air purifier and 1 circuit to control the light. Again, you can't use the light in an occupied space, so we want to make sure that you're able to switch that on and off separately from the air purifier that's going to run all the time. So that's everything about Luxabel stuff. Now we'll jump into the Golden Sea UV products. So as mentioned, there are 3 products that are more directed towards consumer use, and then the remaining products here that are directed for industrial use. We'll talk about each one of these individually, but what I want to call out here on this slide is the UVM 900. This, some of you, if you've seen any of our marketing materials, may have seen this guy. This is the largest fixture that's going to be offered, and it's essentially a road case that you roll out and open up. They're doing some redesign work on this. I'm not exactly sure what that redesign is going to be. I've heard a few different things, but this will be a product. It's just not, we don't know what the final version is yet. So we're not going to talk about that one in detail today, but it is there if you've seen anything on it. So let's jump into the Golden Sea stuff. First thing is the UV box. Now this is a very interesting product that has a ton of application. This is a small box that you can put portable devices in, phones, keys, your wallet, writing utensils, your mask, what have you, that you can disinfect those. So again, that these products are all portable in nature. They have timers that are built into them on the Golden Sea products. So you'll see with each one of them what the different timer options are and what that does in terms of the coverage. So in this particular product, the additional time is going to be about what the size of the item is that you're putting in there. So, if you have a phone that takes up most of the box, you're probably going to want to run it for 15 minutes. If you have, a set of keys that's pretty small and in the middle, you can run it for 5 minutes. You just select whatever option you want. There are safety features built into this that don't allow the lights to run unless the lid is fully closed. But this is something that can be used at home. It could be used in a doctor's office with a waiting area. You could use in a restaurant, lots of different applications here. Any place where you have people waiting where they might want to disinfect their things while they wait, or for home use and safety as well. So that's the UV box. Next, we have the UV S4. This guy is designed for closets or cars or really small rooms or specific areas within a room. So it's a small form factor and can fit a lot of places. Notice here their sizes. We have a 30, 60, and 120 minute timer. So a square meter, as shown in this picture here, that's about the size of, say, a bookshelf. Or maybe the inside of a small closet, a coat closet or something like that. So different applications here that we can use for this guy. Then we go up to the UVP 36. So this is the last of the consumer products. This is designed more for a room in your house or maybe your office or something like that. We have our times here that show our area that we can cover. So 10 square meters, 20 square meters, and 40 square meters based on the timers. So this is a great little product that can be used in many different applications. Now we get into the industrial things. So notice that our form factor changes here a little bit. These are going to be a little bit hardier and lend themselves more towards moving them around, whereas the consumer products have a nicer aesthetic. So if they were sitting out on your shelf or something at your house, you wouldn't feel like you had to hide it or cover it or something. So the industrial products have scale as well. So this is the UVL72. Again, looking at our timer, we have a 30-minute, 60-minute, and 120-minute option that ranges from 20 square meters out to 80 square meters. So these can do a decent sized room. Mounting height is much the same as Luxabel. You want to be at that kind of 3-meter range, 3 to 4 meters, so 9 to 12 feet with most of these products. If you were going to wall mount it, or you can take it and you can set it on a table, set it on the floor, or whatever you want to do. The UVT 72, this is a longer version, but similar in output. Here we have a 60-minute, 120, 180 minutes, and we go from 40, 80, and 120 square meters, similar mounting height, similar form factor. These are just about options, really. There are recommendations on where you can use them, as you see, like medium to large size rooms, hotel, office, workshop, classroom. All those things are just recommendations, but the form factor is going to lend itself to your application. So, you might want, if you had a long, narrow room, you might want the UVT 72 versus if you had a more square room that's shorter or something, the UVL 72 might be totally sufficient. It's also going to be about your times that you're looking for based on your application. Then we can jump up to the UVL 150. Now notice the similarity in this guy versus the UVL 72. They look very similar. It's basically two of those stacked on top of each other. So by that, we can cover the same amount of area, but we can cut our time in half, or we can keep the same times and we can cover the same area. So 40, 80, and 160 square meters. It starts to get to be pretty sizable spaces. Then we get up to the big guy that rolls. So this is the UVM 216. This is considered the medium unit because the UVM 900 that I mentioned that's being redesigned, that is considered the large unit. But this guy can really cover a lot of area. So 120 square meters, 240, or up to 360 square meters with one single unit. That's pretty powerful, and that can do a lot of different stuff. To put that in perspective, you're looking at something that is, like a 10 by 30 room, 10 meter by 30 room, which is going to be about 30 by 90 feet. So that's a pretty big area that you can use for one unit. So potential applications, thinking about the products, in commercial spaces, we could look at nearly any place: entertainment venues, studios, dentist office. There's lots of application that's been used for many years of looking at specific disinfection of equipment or tools. Maybe you have a designated room that you put things into, but it can be used any place nearly where people gather is a good commercial application. One of the important things here from a business perspective is thinking about the marketing side of it, of being able to tell customers that you're doing everything possible to make sure that they're going to be safe, which is going to allow them to have confidence in giving you their business. So that's really important. From a residential aspect, you can, as I said, you can use it in closets, in your car, garages, rooms, what have you, or specific things, the UV box, personal effects, any of that kind of stuff. So the applications here for this stuff is nearly endless, and it's really about thinking creatively and what's going to make the most sense for what you're trying to do or what your customer is trying to do if you're in the resale business. So these are the products, just again to go through. Now let's talk about implementation and layout specifically. So when we're talking about doing a system layout or thinking about how we're going to use these fixtures, we need to understand what we're doing here and what the goal is. When we're discussing UVC in reference to using it to disinfect things, we talk about the dosage. So the dosage is the amount of UVC irradiance that is put out from the fixture and that is reaching the target, whatever that is. There are 4 variables that we can play with in order to achieve that dosage. So the first variable is going to be power. That's going to be determined by whichever fixture you're using. The second variable is going to be quantity. So if you had if you add fixtures that can increase your dosage or subtract them. The third is going to be your throw distance. As I mentioned, most of these are recommended on like a 9 to 12 foot throw, and that's what the calculations are sorted around for examples, but that's certainly not the only option. You could have it closer if you wanted it to be faster or a stronger dosage. You could have it further away if you had a bigger space. So throw distance is going to be a consideration there. And then the last one is time. As I mentioned in the cut sheet for the Luxabel stuff, they talk about being less than 15 minutes to be able to achieve desired disinfection rates. So that's one of the elements that we can play with, is if you have a super overpowered system because you're trying to do things really fast. If you needed to do a 2-minute turn for disinfection, then you can add, you can play with these other variables to be able to reduce your time. Or if you're talking a big open space and you want to do the fewest number of units possible for cost reasons, then or even labor efficiency, then you can increase your time and it'll accomplish the same goal within reason, of course. There does come a point where either your throw distance or your time is beyond what is considered usable, but certainly these are things that you can play with. So in order to understand how to lay out a system, you need to know the desired coverage area and your target dosage. The target dosage, as I mentioned in the other webinar that we've done, you can look into the science kind of stuff, or you can do your own research that talks about the numbers and how we get to these things. But the general point here is that dosage is measured in joules per square meter. So that's the designation that we use. And that designation comes from the amount of output that a fixture has over time. And then scientists have done lots of research to attribute that power to various different things and determine how they are affected. Based on that research that's been done, Lexabel recommends using 67 joules per square meter as the target dosage for COVID-19 and other various elements that we want to fight. There's a wealth of options that you can go through. And again, if you want to look at the details or learn more about that, you can check out the other webinar that we'll post the link to. So 67 joules per square meter is our target, which answers that question. And then we need to know how big of a space we're looking at. Both Golden Sea and Lexabel have super easy to use calculators. So I've talked about a lot of different numbers in this. I touched on them very briefly because those calculators make things super simple. The Lexabel one is online. If you go to any of their product pages, you can get a link to it. And then it's a simple drop-down menu system where you select the product and then fill in the information, and it spits out the amount of time that it needs to be on in order to achieve the dosage you selected. The Golden Sea UV calculator in its current form is in an Excel sheet that gives you a lot of different options and things to manipulate, but they're both easy to use calculators that give you basic information. At the end of the day, this is light. So most of the people on this webinar, I assume, are lighting people. It's not that different than laying out visible light. It's just that you can't see it. But the thought process is essentially the same. When you want to get into more complicated layouts, you can use a program called Dialux. There are others out there as well. Dialux is a free one that essentially allows you to take IES files and do photometric layouts with this stuff, similar to the way that you would do for visible light. And we have information that allows you to convert like foot candles or lux into a dosage amount so that you can reach whatever target you're going for. So there's several different ways that we can do these layouts, and we can help you with any of that stuff. The thing to think about when you're doing this, though, as I mentioned briefly earlier, is this is light. So we do have light and shadow that we have to consider. There's a certain amount of inherent reflectance of materials that you could bounce around things. But the most reflective material, generally speaking, is going to be aluminum. And I don't know a lot of places that have aluminum walls or desks or whatever else. So if you're talking about something that has a lot of furniture or other obstacles in the way, then rather than doing the biggest unit that you can to cover the area, it might make more sense to look at using a higher quantity of smaller units so that you don't have as many shadows. Just something to think about. So we can help you with those layouts, definitely. Now, one of the most important aspects of this is to be able to verify what you're doing, right? This isn't visible light, so we can't go and sit there and, just with our eye and experience know that we have the right coverage that we need. So we need to be able to know that what our intent was is actually met when we use this technology, either on a portable or install basis. So that can be done in two different ways. One way is that you can go buy a UVC meter. This works just like a light meter. I found some online for a couple $100, or you can use what's called dosimeter stickers or test strips. So these are single-use strips that work kind of like a pool chemical testing strip that you set it out, turn the lights on, come back, and then it changes color, and you refer to a chart that tells you how much dosage has been received at that location. So my personal recommendation for that is certainly doing the verification in whatever form you think is best when you do the original installation, or if it's portable, maybe every time, or spot checking. But then even in an install, once you've verified it the first time, you want to do that regularly, probably once per quarter, to make sure that your lamps are still working and you don't have any unexpected changes. All right, so talking about control, Golden Sea, as I mentioned, has a wireless remote, or they have onboard controls if you want to push the button, regardless of how you do it. They do have a delay. There's a countdown that starts, you leave the room, and then you come back after it's done. And like I said, there is a beeping sound, and there are LED status lights that tell you when it's done if you're not paying attention, or if you forget or something, or what have you. The wireless remote does work through walls. So depending on the room and what the wall is, you should be able to start it from not in the room with the wireless remote. So that's super handy. Lexabel products, again, we recommend that those are hardwired controls. If you're going to hardwire them, the switch should be in a separate location from the installation. So what I mean by that is, say you were to install them in a conference room in your office, you have the fixtures in there to be able to safely use that. You don't want the switch to turn them on in the conference room. You actually want to install that switch in maybe a closet in the hallway or in someone's office outside of the conference room, so that you can make sure that you have the ability to turn them on and off from outside the room there is not a delay that is automatically built into the fixtures when you hardwire them. So that's the primary reason for that. The secondary thing to keep in mind with controls when we're talking about hardwired, because these aren't Luxabel provided devices, you have to be you have to think a little harder about how you put a system together, and Kinetic can certainly help with that integration aspect to help you lay something out. But the controls need to be locked. So that needs to be something where your designated operator is the only one that has access. That lock can be either a digital pin pad, it can be a key switch, or it can just be a simple locking cover, or maybe in a closet that only certain people have a key to, whatever. But it needs to be something that not anybody can just go intentionally or accidentally flip that switch, and then you're turning on lights in a room and nobody has any idea. So that's a really important aspect. It's also recommended, if you're going to do hardwired, that you add a timer in line in that system, either by maybe your timer is the only switch and it's behind a locking cover, or you have a switch to provide power to the timer, and then you run your timer for whatever time you need. And like I mentioned earlier, additional motion sensors can be added. So let's touch on motion sensors just for a minute for both the Golden Sea and the Luxabel stuff, because we didn't talk about the usage of that necessarily. So the intent in the motion sensor is that if somebody were to walk into the room while the fixture is on, then the motion sensor will actually kill the light or make sure that they're not going to be exposed. Now, there is a reasonable distance where those become ineffective. I believe the number for the Luxabel stuff is about 25, 30 feet where the motion sensors can't see things. There also might be installations where the one on board the fixture isn't enough. So say, for example, you installed 10 fixtures down a long hallway that only has an entrance on one end and the other. You may not want to use just the onboard motion sensors, because then you're going to have somebody who walks into the hallway and then they have to turn off each fixture as they walk down the hallway. Instead, you could put one motion sensor at either end that's outboard and switches off the entire circuit either way. So that's an application. Another application might be if you were installing them in, say, an auditorium or a ballroom that has a light lock or a sound lock between doors. You could put the motion sensor in that light lock, and then if somebody opened the doors to go in before they even went into the room, the fixtures would switch off. So different ways that you can implement that, and lots of different things that you can do with it, but it gives you a lot of flexibility from the safety perspective. Let's talk about operation and maintenance next. So as I've mentioned before, we want to have dedicated operators. Those need to be trained and competent persons, and they need to use appropriate PPE whenever they're using the technology. We do help provide that training. So there are some videos that we're working with both manufacturers to develop, and we'll also probably have some written stuff as well. And we will make sure that our dealers like Kinetic are informed and able to provide that training to any end users or to help you with your installation as well. So training is a must, but you don't only need to train the people that are going to operate it, you also need to train the people that are going to be working around it. So if you were to install this technology, say in a restaurant, you want to make sure that all of your servers, hostesses, and then even your cooks or whoever, anybody that's in the building is going to have a minimal amount of training to understand what the technology is. The important things there are that they know that it's there, they know that they shouldn't be exposed to it, and they know that if there's an issue with it, that they know who to talk to make sure that it gets dealt with. So you go back to that designated operator. The next thing from an operation and maintenance standpoint is making sure that you have appropriate signage. So if this is going to be used in a space, or when this is used in a space, you always want to make sure that you're marking the space outside, much like a wet floor sign after you mop. You want to have something that says that UVC is in use and not to enter. The Golden Sea fixtures, they come with signage for the industrial products. The consumer products do not, but the industrial products do. The Luxabel products, they don't have anything, but we can certainly work that out if that's something that you're interested in. An important note too that is kind of a funny one that we've gotten questions from several people. The UVC technology is not a replacement for other cleaning methods. So putting UVC in a bathroom doesn't mean that you don't have to mop the floor anymore. In fact, quite the opposite, that research has shown that really what you want to do is you want to couple UVC with other cleaning methods to get the maximum disinfection rates. So you still want to wipe down high touch surfaces. You still want to make sure that you're doing your general cleaning. If you're looking at the Luxabel stuff, or even the Golden Sea stuff too, you could do air purification by way of the air. with the lights. So you want to couple that stuff on top of each other as much as you can. There's a lot of backing that that estimates that if you do this correctly and you use the right methodology to clean your space, that you can decrease an infection rate by up to 80%. You're never going to stop people 3 feet away from each other from coughing in their face, so you can't prevent that. But what you can prevent is anything ambient. So just think about that number for a second. 80% fewer infection rates. That's not just COVID-19. That's the flu, that's colds, that's any sickness that we can combat using this technology. So think about what you could do as a business or an organization if you had 80% less sick days. That's a really big number and something to kind of take to heart that really makes this investment worth it. From a maintenance standpoint, we do want to replace the lamps annually. If you're using them really, really frequently, maybe more often, but assuming once or twice a day, annually is a good replacement. Most of the lamps are rated for 9,000 hours, so they're going to last a lot longer than the 1 year, but you want to make sure that you're getting the maximum efficacy out of them so that you're not losing any of your disinfection power. And then those air filters for the B Air and B Hybrid, you want to replace those twice annually. And as I mentioned with the dosimeter stickers, it is recommended that you spot check those dosages for quality control to make sure that everything's working as it should be. All right, we've talked about a lot of different stuff, but haven't talked so much about how this might look in the real world. So let's look at some examples in commercial spaces. So one thing that you could do if you had a hotel is possibly install B-Airs in all the guest rooms, the common spaces, and offices. They have a really nice aesthetic to them. So in most types of places, they're not going to look super out of place. Those can run all the time and make sure that everybody's safe. And then you can give your housekeeping staff a pile of the UVM 216s and UVL 72s, perhaps, from a portable stance to go put in the room. So they go clean a room, and then they set this in the middle, and they set the UVL 72 in the bathroom. They leave the room, turn them on, go clean the next one, and then they come back and get them once they're done cleaning, and they just sort of leapfrog. Might be one implementation that you could have at a hotel. Bars and restaurants. Depending on your aesthetic, you could put a bunch of B hybrids throughout the entire facility, in the dining area, in the restrooms, in the back offices, in the kitchen, wherever. Those can just be running. And then maybe you want to put a UV box at the host stand so that as people are waiting for a table, they can disinfect any of their stuff. Or if you're using pagers for people, you could disinfect the pagers between uses. In a theater, might want to install B hybrids backstage and in the ticket office, so you can run the air purifiers during the day and the lights after hours. And then B airs in the front of house, restrooms, and lobby. Again, thinking about the aesthetic, so those can run all the time. And then provide stagehands and custodians with some portable units to be able to go through and do things between shows, disinfect the stage, disinfect any of the house areas, what have you. Or if you're in like an industrial warehouse, perhaps, you could really, that's about volume and mass and efficiency. So you'd want a bunch of B-Direct 2s probably throughout the entire warehouse space, and maybe hybrids in the offices. Maybe you want B-Airs and directs in the restrooms. And why I say that in the restroom as opposed to hybrids is really about, thinking about stalls. So you put an air in the bathroom to do the purification, and then you put the B-Directs distributed throughout the restroom depending on the size so that you can avoid any of that shadowing. Some people have talked about as well installing an isolated sanitizing room for goods and equipment. In the entertainment world, that could be a trailer or a sea container. It could be just a room off your warehouse that you can close. It could be something that's outside a tent, any sort of portable setup that you get. So lots of different applications. So that's everything that I have today about general information. I know that Laura and Jen have some questions, and I see that there are tons of questions coming in as well from people that are watching. So thanks very much for tuning in, and let's jump in.
Oh, you're muted.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with the questions that people asked. So starting with the first question here from Andrew Leah. I'm considering putting this into various rooms at a university theater setting, including costume shop storage. Regarding material degradation, would the UVC lights be harmful to costumes if used overnight to disinfect? and how long of an exposure until it damages fabric?
That is a good question. As I mentioned a little bit, the material degradation is going to be so specific to whatever materials you're thinking of using it on. So there are definitely going to be some things that are more susceptible than others. And also for that reason is why I mentioned you want to figure out what that ideal dosage time is and make sure that you hit that, but you don't want to go way past that so that you're not getting any unintended results. So I don't have a cut and dry answer for you as to say, that these costumes are going to have this problem and other costumes are going to have that, but certainly you can do some testing, hopefully maybe do some fabric testing on your own to kind of determine what's there, and keep in mind that this is a relatively short time. It is a lot of power that we're talking about, but you're generally speaking going to be talking about 15 to 30 minutes once a day, or perhaps even once a week. So any degradation that you do see is going to be over a long period of time and may not even be that different than what you would see from everyday use and just moving stuff around or whatever. I know that's not a super straightforward answer, but hopefully that gives you a few things to think about.
Helpful. Alicia Nab, hi Alicia. She asked how and where would we find the proper training for this use?
So the training, as I mentioned, is something that we're going to be providing from support from our manufacturers. So we will make sure that Kinetic has the information to train you if you're buying from them. If you're another dealer or somebody who buys directly from us, then we would provide that information for you. Some of that is going to be video, some of that is going to be written, and we will also then have as well waivers that talk about liability and things that kind of trickle down. So that should be sufficient, but if there's anything that we don't have in what we're offering, certainly we can go above and beyond. We have a really great support team at ACT that does a lot of different things, so we can absolutely make it happen.
Awesome, thank you, Brad. Next question is from Mark Mongold. Any thought on the new research on far UVC at 220 or less nanometers?
I'm glad you asked that question. So far UVC is a technology that's gotten a lot of hype lately. And the reason that it's gotten hype, if you aren't familiar with it, is because there are claims that it is safe for humans, so it could be used in occupied spaces or even be used to disinfect people. There's a huge asterisk that goes with that. UVC covers 200 to 285 nanometers, or 280. We're talking about 254, which, as I mentioned, is about 85% maximum efficacy. There's a bell curve that shows you what that is. So the top of the bell curve, we're right down here. 222 is pretty far down that curve. So that means that the potency isn't discriminatory in any of these applications. So if you're talking about far UVC, there are some studies that are starting to come out now that point to the amount of UVC, or far UVC, I should say, that would have to be used means that you're talking about much longer exposure time. So I saw an article done by the Illumination Engineering Society on LinkedIn the other day that had some graphs and heat maps and things, and said if you were to put it in a doorway and walk through it, you'd have to stand in the doorway for about 2 hours to be useful. So the practical application with where the technology is a little bit challenging. Further than that, and perhaps more importantly, as of right now, there is no research that talks about long-term potential risks with far UVC. Short-term has been determined that it doesn't penetrate the skin and the eyes, but that doesn't mean that if it were everywhere in everyday life and you're exposed to it 8 hours a day, that there's not going to be something in the long run, which I would think likely will be. I'm not an expert in that, but I would question whether or not that's going to be something that's as safe as it sounds like it is. And then the last point to it is right now, there are standards that are out there from ISO and the FDA and other organizations that talk about acceptable human exposure to UVC. Those standards cover the entire 200 to 280 spectrum, which includes far UVC. So until those are changed, there are a lot of applications where they can't do it, if they have to abide by those standards. And it's going to take some time and lots of research before those can get changed. So there are some challenges with it, not the least of which is the fact that the potency from an LED standpoint and at that range is going to be pretty costly, it sounds like. But I would caution against it. It's not the superhero that it sounds like it's going to be. Maybe someday it will be, but I don't think today we're there yet.
Great. Ted asks about pricing for the products, and Ted, we can get you quotes on that. All you want to do is email sales@kineticlighting.com. Laura, if you could type that into the chat maybe. But yeah, if you email sales@kineticlighting.com, we can get you pricing on any of the products that Brad has talked about here.
And just one important note there about pricing is they're all pretty affordable. This isn't a get rich kind of deal. This is something that are products that see a need in the world to be able to help us all get back to work and back to whatever the new normal is going to be. So they're very affordable, and what you make up for in potential, labor savings from not having to, wipe down your entire building every day, or also just from, general efficiency and being able to have customers again, it's well offset by the minimal investment.
Awesome. Stephanie, I'm going to skip your question about UVC light and asking if it's dangerous for skin and eyes, since we already addressed that, but feel free to type in if you had a more specific question and we'll definitely get to that. So Andy, moving on to your question, obviously there's a certain virus that's on everyone's mind right now. I heard you mention antibacterial, but will these products kill viruses as well?
Yeah, so like so many things with COVID-19 and this version of the coronavirus, there are a lot more unanswered questions than answered ones. What we don't have today is we don't have an exact dosage that we know that will kill COVID-19. But a very important but, what we do have is a ton of research about what scientists agree is considered to be the most closest cousin to this strain of the coronavirus, which is a former strain of SARS. And that dosage is around 40 joules per square meter. So given that information, that's where Luxabel got to their 67 number, is the average of coronaviruses that might be a target, and then making sure that we're exceeding what is considered to be that closest cousin. So yes, it definitely will kill it. There is not finite research that identifies an exact number yet, but I'm sure that there will be. This is a pretty hot topic right now, so definitely working on it. And all of the calculators and things that are used by Luxabel and by Golden Sea do have safety factors built into them to make sure that we're not just meeting what we're saying, but we're exceeding it as well.
And if I remember correctly, that was in the Luxabel webinar that we were going to share, right?
Correct. Yep.
Rachel asks, is there a plan for units? We're losing Brad. There's Brad. Is there a plan for units that function effectively at higher ceiling heights over 12 feet?
You can definitely use any of the fixtures over 12 feet. But as I mentioned, there comes a point where you're kind of outside of what's considered reasonable. And that's not necessarily a limitation of the fixtures, that's more a limitation of the technology. It is a short wavelength, so it doesn't travel very far, unlike a long wavelength. So, if you're looking at 60-foot throws, that's probably something where it's not going to happen, or we need to think about a different, more creative way to attack that problem. Maybe in an auditorium, rather than mounting it on the bottom of the grid and shining down that's 60 feet up, maybe you hang them on a pipe and you fly them in, to 15 feet at the end of the day or something. So there's different ways to attack that. But certainly a lot of people, Golden Sea and Luxabel included, are working on getting the highest power units possible. The UVM 900, I think, is the largest that I have certainly seen. And really that's happening by adding more lamps. Because we're using that trusted Philips light source. So we're not reinventing the wheel there. We're just adding quantity to get more power out of it.
Awesome. So kind of going off of that, will this be effective as a tunnel entrance sort of setup? Julio was wondering.
Yeah, definitely. We've had a lot of people think about that. Now, again, not a tunnel entrance for people to walk through, but if you, as a rental shop, wanted to, set up a tunnel entrance of some kind to push gear through, and you set the gear in there and you turn it on for 2 minutes, and then you take it out the other side. Absolutely, that's an option. Remember the 4 variables that we have to work with: that power, distance, time, and words. I'm blanking on whatever I said the fourth one was. But in that kind of an application, you're talking about getting probably B direct 2s or maybe the 150s from Golden Sea and putting a bunch of them around so that you're way overpowering for the throw distance that you need in close quarters, and then you can do it very quickly. So from an efficiency standpoint, you're not slowing down your process.
Got a few questions about the disinfection box. So I'll start with Nancy's, but a little bit more detail maybe on the disinfection box. Like, can I put like a Ryobi drill in there? Do you have to turn the item over to fully disinfect it? Can you put your cell phone in there? Those kinds.
Yeah, so one of the notes, if you go online and look at the Golden Sea site, one of the notes for the UV box says that you shouldn't put valuables in it. That is very much kind of a CYA statement. Again, not knowing what every single thing in the world is made out of from a material perspective and how it might be affected. You're probably not going to want to put like a family heirloom or your wedding ring in the box, just in case something were to happen. If it were to discolor stone or the metal or whatever, that would certainly be unfortunate. But from a practical application standpoint, yes, you can put anything in it. It's absolutely recommended for cell phones. In fact, the size of it is really geared towards being able to fit any cell phone that's on the market. So the size is roughly, if I remember the dimensions correctly, it's about 8.5 inches by 7 inches by like 1.5 inches. So it's big enough to fit a lot of mobile devices. That said, probably not big enough for a drill or something like that. If you were looking for that kind of an application, maybe a better solution would be to take one of the other GSUV units and build it into a box. So you take tools and you set them in a box and you close the lid and turn the light on and then open it up when you're done.
Awesome. So if the room has furniture, how do you know that it's disinfected every surface? So if you want to talk a little bit about like the shadow that you were talking about.
Yep. So I covered this a little bit, but to hit it in more detail again. So it's important to use those verification methods to know that we are actually hitting the dosage that we're anticipating to. So using those dosimeter strips or stickers throughout the room is a really effective way to do that. And shadows are a real thing. So like I said, if you're talking about say a ballroom where you have a bunch of chairs set out for an event, rather than putting one unit that's up at the front where the speaker is and shining through everything, maybe you want to do some of the UVM72 or UVL72 units that are hanging on the truss that go around the the seating area so that you can shine straight down more, so that your shadows are going to be more contained to the places underneath chairs where people are less likely to be touching. So some things to think about there about distributing the light, absolutely, and then you definitely want to use whatever you can to verify that you're achieving what the goal is.
And something you and I have talked about before, but to go into detail about tents. Will we work with solid white tents, clear top and sides?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why it wouldn't. I would not say that you should depend on the tent for the reflectance, meaning that you don't want to just put one on one side of the tent and hope that it's going to bounce off the tent because it's white and then hit the other side. I would say that you could use the tent to contain the light and make sure that you're not exposing anyone outside the tent, but you want to make sure that your light setup is done in such a way that you have sufficient coverage for whatever you're trying to do.
But a great idea for tents would actually be the B-Air.
Mm-hmm.
Even not hardwired situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're talking about a tent event, certainly, put a B-Air in that for people walking around, and yeah, and it's probably going to help it smell better too, so you don't get the sweaty humidity.
No, that's a good idea. Laura?
Let's see. So can you talk about kind of the listings and stuff for this? So someone's asking if it's EPA approved, but then if we also want to piggyback on that and talk about the UL listing, CE, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so all of these products are both CE and UL listed. So from an electrical safety standpoint, they're definitely there. There is no EPA or FDA approval, and that has to do with the amount of processing time. I can dig it up and certainly post it for you if you want, or I can send it to Laura and Jen to distribute to whoever's watching. But the EPA and FDA both released information saying that with regards to COVID-19, they have essentially said that they cannot keep up with the request load. So any requirements that would be necessary from a government standpoint or public setting to have those certifications is essentially null for now, because they can't possibly process them fast enough. So both of these manufacturers are very good at what they do, and they have definitely done the research, and they have done the right things that when that backlog is caught up, I'm certain that they will be. But until that time, no, they don't carry any of those kinds of certifications. But it essentially, people are given a pass today.
And Stephanie's other question was, what is the kill log?
So kill log, I assume you're referring to the logarithmic value that's mentioned, much like on, say, Clorox products or whatever, where it says that it kills 99.9% of bacteria. That is the kill rate that is determined by a log value. So the way that that multiplier works, and this is a math thing, it's not specific to Luxabel or to Golden Sea or whatever, is it starts at 90%, and then you basically add nines from there. So log 1 is 90, log 2 is 99, log 3 is 99.99, log 4 is 99.99. And with each of those log steps, you have to double the amount of dosage that you're providing in order to achieve the next one. The calculators are set up as such so that they are looking at a log 4 or a 99.99% kill rate at the appropriate dosage with a safety factor. So they are definitely there. And again, if you want to dig into some of the sciencey stuff, that other webinar goes into that.
We're at 2:02 now. There was a couple of last questions, but one of them I think we covered with the shadows that you have to move it around. But Bill Murray asks, as I work in many hotel environments, do you see any standards being set in place for events, meetings, or is this just the start? It seems as though many hotels do have this placed in loading docks and backhaul areas.
Yeah, I mean, if I were somebody in a hotel, I would want to be able to get as many events in as possible. And therefore, I would want to be able to say that we have the resources or the technology and the equipment to be able to make sure that we're doing that. Every hotel has already way upped their game with hand washing stations or hand sanitizer and increased cleaning procedures. All of that stuff we've seen. So this is essentially another level of that, or another step to it, that allows people to provide more confidence and allows you to do it a little bit more efficiently. If you're talking a big ballroom or something like that in a hotel, that takes a long time to really clean that in a sanitary way. So if you were to do it manually and wipe every single surface, so you do your normal cleaning procedures, you wipe your high touch surfaces with disinfectant, and then you run the lights, and it's not that much additional labor than you would otherwise have already.
Great.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's we got through all the questions that everybody had. If you come up with more questions, feel free to email us. We put our email address in the comments on there. It's sales@kineticlighting.com, and we can answer your questions and provide any quotes or anything else that you may need. So thanks so much, Jen and Brad, for being here with us, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time today, and let us know how we can help.
Stay safe.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.